I'm Jeremy Shepherd.
And I'm Damien.
We use data to expose deceitful property experts and their marketing BS. This is the Expert Busting Series.
This is part 4 of our Expert Busting Series. We're uncovering amenities and why it's nonsense for picking superior growth. Let's dive in, Jez.
Yeah, so you may think that buying a property that's close to favourable amenities like schools, shops, transport nodes is going to give you better capital growth, but it actually doesn't have any impact, especially over the long term. Now, if it does have any impact, it doesn't last. This is Expert Bust number 4, amenities.
Alrighty. So is it amenities or amenities? We had this debate earlier.
I'm going to use both.
So what have we got here, Jez?
All right, so the amenities that are usually referred to are schools, shops, transport nodes like train stations or bus stops, parks. You might find waterways in the list, large bodies of water like rivers and beaches, gyms, shopping complexes, places of worship, and there's probably more. But there's a fundamental flaw to all of this, and the best way to explain this flaw is the apples and oranges analogy.
Yep. And before we do, and you hear this a lot in the industry, don't you? That I want to buy near a train station, or I want to be near the beach, or it needs to be close to a school of some sort. So I'm looking forward to this.
Or far away from something like busy roads or a skate park or a busy shopping centre or something. Yeah, so the apples and oranges analogy works like this. Let's say 100 years ago, you walk into a fruit shop, there's a crate of apples, 1 cent each, and then there's a crate of oranges for 2 cents each. Now, if apples grew at 4% per annum and oranges grew at 8% per annum, 100 years later, an apple would cost 50 cents and an orange would cost $44. Now, picture yourself walking into that fruit shop, and you're going to pick some fruit. It would be a very keen orange enthusiast that would pay $44
for an orange.
Yeah. So long before that absurd price difference became a reality, buyers would walk into the fruit shop. They'd think, gee, oranges are a bit expensive. I'm going to look for an alternative. That attitude would knock demand from the sale of oranges and increase demand for the sale of apples. So there would be an accelerated rate of growth for apples compared to oranges until they picked up. And so what you'd probably find is that after 100 years, maybe an apple costs $1 and an orange costs 2, or an apple costs 50 cents and an orange costs 1. So the price difference would remain the same because it's still just an apple, still just an orange. Nothing dramatic has changed there. And we've got another episode in this series on that very topic, apples and oranges. I think it's episode number... there's actually a few. There's an apples and oranges episode that you should look for, and then there's another one on holding for the long term, episodes 12 and 13. Anyway, we'll flick up something on the screen to show you. All right, so that's apples and oranges, which gives you the basis for why this whole thing of buying near amenities doesn't work. Okay, so this analogy, this apples and oranges analogy, suggests that properties near schools, shops, transport nodes, or parks cannot continue to outperform. So if those schools, shops, parks, etc., have always been there since as long as you can remember, the benefit of them has already been factored into the price of properties, and that's why superior growth does not last. So properties close to amenities, they may command a higher price tag, but if those amenities have always been there, those properties have always been that bit more expensive than those that are further away from the amenities. So as investors, we're not interested in price, we're interested in growth.
So if I think about it, Jez, an example would be, let's say a property 50 years ago was 100,000. It's on the beach side or closer to the beach, where maybe if it's a couple kilometres inland, that property is maybe only worth 50,000. That's already been factored in, like that land value has already been factored in at that time. And I'm sure you'll go through it, but if they both grow, that suburb grows at 8%, you would get the growth, but that have different starting points.
That's right, yeah. unless the beach moves.
Unless the beach moves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you have an introduction of a new amenity, like let's say it's a train station, that high growth rate, it won't last forever. So each year the price gap between these properties that have the amenity close by versus the have-nots, that would potentially widen, you'd assume, if this concept of being close to an amenity had any merit. But eventually, buyers consider that price difference too great. They can't justify paying more. And at that point, the benefit of the amenity has become fully factored into the price of property. So the above average growth reverts to normal growth. Okay, so there are some reports that you may have seen that mention properties closer to certain schools attract a higher price tag. Like they might say within the catchment zone, properties are typically 10% more expensive than other properties in the same suburb, or 20%, or whatever that figure is. And the implication from those reports is that you'll be better off buying in the catchment zone rather than out. But that 10%, 20%, whatever that difference is, that's the current price difference. It's not the change in future growth. It's not a growth rate. It's a difference in price. That difference in value may have already been factored into the price for many years now. So in this example, you can see here, assume property A is 10% more expensive than property B. That's because A is closer to the train station. If 20 years pass by, A has not moved any closer to the train station, assuming that's the case, and B hasn't moved it any further away from the train station, then why would we expect that 10% difference to have increased? It doesn't. It's nonsense.
So in the example there, after 20 years, we're factoring in that both the suburbs had this obviously same amount of growth. Both the properties have had the same amount of growth because it's within the same suburb. It's just that one's a kilometre away and the other one's 2 kilometres away.
Yeah, unless they have moved closer or further away, that price difference in percentage terms shouldn't have changed, so they have the same growth. Yeah, so a 10% difference in current prices doesn't mean there'll be a difference in future growth rates. Just because one property or one suburb is twice as expensive as another one, it doesn't mean it has had twice the growth. Suburbs don't all start at the same price, like that example you gave of properties on the beach versus further away. So
how about a buyer's agent who says, I can pick that property that's going to outperform within that suburb?
Great question. And I've got a slide right towards the end on that exact topic.
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, superior historical growth does not mean superior future growth. And for more on that topic, we've got another episode. Check out episode number 10 in this series. It's on, I think it's titled High Past Growth is a Red Flag or something like that. Yeah.
I guess viewers that are, when we release this, 10 won't be available, but once all the episodes are out, it'll be
make
available.
Sure you put it in your calendar, check out episode number 10. All right, so this all sounds very logical. If you can just forward to the next slide there, Damo. But the truth is, of course, determined by what the data has to say. Now, it was 2018 when I last looked into the influence of amenities on future growth. It's now 2024, so time for an update. And here is a list of the amenities that I analysed. So we've got train stations, schools, beaches, large shopping centres and airports. Now, that might not be the ideal set of amenities, but it's enough to see if they are of any importance to investors. Okay, so I'm starting off with train stations. Here's a map of Sydney's rail network. This is thanks to Daniel Eccleshaw. There are a lot of suburbs that do have train stations in Sydney, well over 150 that you can see there. And I think there have been a few more since this was published. We're not interested in those because to see if having a train station improves capital growth over the long term, we only want to examine the growth rates of suburbs that have already had a train station well before the growth period that we're looking at started. So, the growth period that I've examined in this case dates back to 1980. So it's 2024 now. It's the end of 2024. It's been about 45 years. So if there is any long-term benefit to growth for suburbs with train stations, then we should see a stark contrast in the growth compared to the growth of other suburbs in Sydney. 4.5 decades is more than enough time to make that difference really obvious. And the next chart shows what happens. All right. So I've created a chart comparing the growth of Sydney suburbs that have train stations against the growth of Sydney suburbs without train stations. Bit of a complicated chart here, so let me just break it down and explain all the details. So start off with something easier. The horizontal x-axis along the bottom shows the period covered from December 1980 to December 2024, a period of 44 years. Now, the left vertical y-axis shows the median value in dollars, and you'll see a turquoise line that plots the growth of the median value of Sydney suburbs without train stations.
Okay.
And it starts off in 1980. It's around about, you can't see on the scale there, it's about $68,000. The purple curve, that plots the growth of the median of Sydney suburbs that do have train stations. And it starts off in 1980, a little bit lower at around, it's 62,000. You have to take my word for it. You can't see because it's a bit too small there. Now, over on the right side of the chart.
They're house prices, Jez.
That's right. Yeah. And this is just house prices. You'll see on the right, there's this vertical y-axis again. It's a secondary axis. And that's measuring the percentage gap between those two lines. Very small gap between them on the bottom left, but it's measured as a percentage. So you'll see that that shaded teal section hanging down from the top of the chart. That's meant to show the discount that a buyer would pay for a property in a suburb with this amenity, with a train station. So it turns out that, suburbs with train stations are actually cheaper than those without in Sydney.
If you look at, for example, 1982, for example. So 1982, there's about, a 17% difference?
Yeah,
is that right?
That's right.
So that means that a 17% gap in prices between a station versus a non-station. So a property that is within a non-station, like a property in a non-station suburb, is outperforming.
It's really just a case of the difference in price. So it's not the performance.
So it's dearer.
It's just it's dearer to be in a suburb that does not have a train station. So for whatever reason, train stations in Sydney, it might be quiet. So you would expect an amenity like a train station is considered a benefit because you can, walk to the train station and hop on and you don't need a car. But there can be some disadvantages. And in this particular case, it just works out that Sydney suburbs have been a little bit more expensive if they do not have a train station compared to those that do. So that's why that shaded section is dropping from the top of the chart down, and it's showing that the gap is a negative figure, meaning you pay a discount for buying in a train station suburb.
Maybe because it's easier, maybe with the buses, with the potentially trams, if you're like in a city, Sydney, or people just park their cars at train stations. A lot of the time there's parking available. So
yeah, I think that the reason why it's cheaper might be that there are exclusive suburbs in Sydney that are just so much more expensive that do not have a train station. You think of trying to catch a train to the beach, for example, in Sydney. That's not easy to do. Yeah. So for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. All we're doing here is measuring that price gap. Now, you will see that the two curves do diverge over time in dollar terms. In other words, that gap widens in dollars. And the percentage gap widens too, but then it shrinks again. So throughout the decades, there is change, but overall, the percentage price gap finishes up pretty close to where it started. It started at -9% and it finished at -14%.
Where's that -9% that you're looking at?
So over the right-hand side is the percentage gap, but on the very left-hand side in the top left-hand corner, you'll see the shaded teal section is towards the top left in 1980, December 1980. And that is actually around about 9%.
Oh, so it's starting a little bit higher over here, 9%. Yeah, it's hard to see.
Yeah, it is difficult to see, but I can tell you, I mean, you can run your eye along that shaded section and see that it hasn't what we would expect if an amenity has an influence on capital growth. There's a suburb that has the amenity and there's one that doesn't. Over time, because of the compound nature of capital growth, you would see that gap go exponential.
But this is
it would be massive.
It's fantastic to see because it, I guess, you say debunks the myth of I need to buy near a train station, for example.
Yeah, well, certainly in Sydney, looking at all the suburbs with train stations over the last 44 years, there's nothing in this chart to suggest there's been a benefit or a disadvantage in buying in a suburb that has or doesn't have a train station.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so
Melbourne's next up.
Let's have a look at Melbourne train stations. You can see here that the suburbs with train stations have outperformed those without. In other words, the percentage gap has widened over the 44 years. So back in 1980, suburbs in Melbourne that had train stations were fractionally cheaper than those without. The percentage price gap in 1980 was around about -10%. That's in the bottom left-hand corner of that chart.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of 2024, that percentage price gap had widened to +6%. So the total change was 16%, from -10 to +6. But that is over 44 years. That's less than 0.4% per year, which is hardly noticeable. What we should have seen, if the amenity is influential to capital growth, a much larger gap. That would have been exponential, but it's barely changed. It looks like it's changed a lot, but that's just the scale on the chart. It's barely changed.
But that's like looking at the chart, that seems like a big gap, doesn't it? Like from over -5% to finishes
to +10%. So it's about a 15% change, 16% to be precise. But that's over 44 years.
And I guess it's not the growth; it's the typical value difference. So this tells me that houses nearest or near the station have performed.
They have performed better at about 0.4% per annum.
Well, that's a lot though, isn't it? If you take it over a 40-year period.
You've got to wait 44 years for that 16% difference to be. I mean, we are talking about something like over 2,000% capital growth over this period of time, and we're arguing about 16% the difference.
It's interesting.
It's inconsequential.
It's interesting to see because Sydney was the opposite. So is it maybe because Sydney's a bit more built out, do we think?
Well, it could be due to congestion. Perhaps there's increased slightly more congestion in Melbourne, but there's certainly nothing in this to think, oh, you've got to buy near a train station in Melbourne. It's just you have to wait half your life for practically no benefit. And I'd also like to point out that there are periods of time where that shaded teal chart, it goes up, it goes down. Right now it's going down. You don't know if it's going to go down even further. It could come right back to where it started from.
What would be interesting, so let's say, a train station is coming into a suburb in 30 years' time. There's plans, it's proposed.
It's proposed,
and so there are individuals out there that will say, train station's going in, or Badgeroo Creek Airport, that's coming in, or maybe if we look at maybe the Kellyville train station. So it'd be interesting to know, did that have a big injection in capital growth when the station came in?
Well, that's a good question, and I've got a slide coming up when we look at airports.
And even I think there's discussions about the fast trains up Central Coastway.
So, the plans for a fast train.
Because, for example, if you look at the south coast of New South Wales, let's just say we go past Wollongong, Shellharbour, even further down, a lot of people do commute via train because it's easy, but maybe there's not as many trains that go through. But if you had a high-speed train go through, those areas are getting busy now, and there's limited stock there. That injecting a fast speed train, be interesting to see what that would do, because it really cuts that commute time. So you've got that lifestyle of sort of being near the beach, not as expensive as Sydney. So it feels like you're on holidays a lot of the time. But then if you want to go to Sydney, it's quick and you miss all the traffic.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how it affects prices. But according to the research that I'm about to show, and it's not long-lived. That accelerated capital growth only lasts for a short time. And there's a great study that Queensland University of Technology did, which I'll go through in another slide. But just to finish off train stations, I thought I'd look at Brisbane as well. So I've plotted the same kind of chart for Brisbane. The two growth curves, you can see there have been neck and neck for almost all of those 44 years. So suburbs without train stations are no worse off than those with train stations. And the percentage gap over 44 years has once again not really changed significantly. There's no sign of an exponential widening of that gap. And importantly, the chart shows that the two curves have crossed over. I think I counted 10 times. So one curve gets in front only to be caught up and passed by the other. So the leader changes every few years. And that's classic apples and oranges, time leveling out growth. It proves that there's this tendency for all properties or suburbs or cities to grow at the same rate over the long term. So there's no real benefit having this amenity.
But back to that high speed train, just thinking about it out loud, Jez. So let's say, Newcastle or Central Coast, there's plans approved, and it could take how many years to get done, but there's a high speed rail going in. A lot of buyers agents or investors will go, I'm going to buy there because you'd have to see some sort of increased demand in those pockets. But we know stock on market's very tight in these areas anyway, especially around New South Wales. So I wonder, I guess we'll only know when it actually happens, wouldn't we? Then we can analyze the data to go, okay, this actually happened but when do you time it? When it's proposed? Because if you know it's already coming in 20 years or 30 years or whenever it might be, it's going to sort of get smoothed out. But a lot of buyers agents say, buy here because of this. But the yield will drop, prices will be too high, and they'll look elsewhere then, wouldn't you?
Well, I think that it's the home buyers that dominate the capital growth because they outnumber investors 2 to 1 in most places. So they want to see that the amenity is there already. So the proposal, that might be getting in before the capital growth. You might think, before the demand increases. But these sorts of projects, the bigger the project is, the longer the delays can be. And a delay of just a couple of years for any sort of infrastructure project is for $1 billion infrastructure project, it's easy to see. But that can be the difference of, say, 0% growth and 20% growth, which for $500,000 property is worth a couple of $100,000.
I was reading something the other day about, I think, the north of Melbourne. They're looking at proposed trains in their and it's like 2052 year. I'm like, okay, so that's going to that's planning ahead. I'm like, okay, but that doesn't. I don't look at that going, I need to invest because of that. Like, that's not the prime reason. I'm paying for a property because that's the market value for that asset, and it's all factored in. Yeah,
there's a lot of things that buyers consider. It's not just, is there a train station? It's peace and quiet. It's crime. It's lifestyle. It's close to work or family and friends. Yeah, so a single infrastructure project really doesn't have the big impact.
And in Australia, we are very reliant on our cars, aren't we? A lot of times. So, and if you move over to, now we've got Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane as a combination with stations versus without.
Yeah, so this one's a little different, this one, because instead of, so previously I've just been looking at growth. This one's about cash flow. So some professionals might argue that yields are better, closer to favourable amenities. So they might accept that, okay, the capital growth isn't going to be that different, but what about the yield, Jeremy? So I again analysed historical data to compare yields of suburbs with stations versus those without. So this time, you notice, because of the heading, I've combined train stations of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane all together. And on this new chart, the horizontal x-axis, you'll notice along the bottom, it only runs from January 2010, not all the way back to 1980. And that's because this is the earliest record I've got of yields. And also the left vertical y-axis, that's not dollars anymore, that's yield. And you'll see that the percentage gap, that is the difference in yields of suburbs with versus those without train stations, it doesn't vary much over that period. And it certainly doesn't show any signs of exponential growth that we would expect if train stations had any influence on yield over the long term. So in other words, completely inconsequential to an investor's bottom line.
And this is for houses, correct? Again.
Yes, houses combined for Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane.
Because I would think maybe it'd be interesting if you, again, it's most probably for another time, but like units are predominantly, I'd say, located closer to these, especially in Sydney, like around these train stations, there's a lot of units that go up. So I wonder if there's a big difference there, but I'm assuming that they're all most probably going to be the same if stock or market's tight everywhere. But what would you classify as a station suburb? So for example, you might have Cronulla, okay, Cronulla in South Sydney, and you've got a train station there, but is it within a kilometre, or are we talking 3 kilometres out? Like, how do you define a station suburb?
Yeah, so in this analysis, all I did was, if the suburb has a station in it, then it gets included. So it doesn't consider the growth of properties that might be beyond walking distance of the train station. Because
you might have a suburb that's only, a kilometre long, for example, radius or square meterage, but then you might have another one that's 5 or 10 kilometres, a bigger suburb. So,
yeah.
Okay, great. That's good to understand.
Yeah. So moving on from train stations, I then went into looking at schools. So Melbourne is well known for its school-focused suburbs. Some suburbs, it's all about the school. So properties within those suburbs usually command a premium price tag. But a chart like this comparing the growth since 1980 to the end of 2024, it shows there's no real value for investors. The percentage gap between suburbs with good schools and those without has not materially changed over the last 44 years. So in 1980, the price gap, that's on the left there, was around 20%. So you have to run your eye across to the right and see that's about level with 20%. And by the end of 2024, that gap was about the same.
20%. Okay, so there hasn't been, it's pretty much saying, because we're not seeing the difference.
Yeah, so if there was some kind of influence, capital growth-wise, over the long term, you would see that shaded teal, that jagged-edged shaded area, you would see that grow exponentially up to the top right, off the top of the chart.
So what's median non-good schools mean?
So just a suburb that doesn't have one of these good schools in it.
What's classified as a good school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did make an assumption that schools that are graded well now have always had those sort of good grades. So if you've got a classic sort of historically well-known school, that gets in the list, and perhaps newer schools, they wouldn't be considered here because we've got to look over a very long period of time.
Okay, so you have your system in place to work that out.
Yeah, I did have to make an assumption that well-graded schools now have always been well-graded.
But
so
I think the key thing is the gap, though. There's no gap.
Yeah, that's right. It's the same. In percentage terms, it's the same. So if good school suburbs are such a draw card for growth, then we should have seen the gap grow exponentially. But instead, it should have been hundreds of percent difference because over 44 years, we are talking about a couple of 1,000% growth.
I think that the key thing that this shows me, I guess, as if you're an investor, it doesn't really matter Does
That's
it?
right.
It shows like
Yeah.
if I've got a certain budget, like you go into a suburb maybe with a typical value of, let's say, 800,000. But let's say my budget or my borrowing capacity, I'm capped at, let's say, 720. You might be able to buy within that suburb, but it might potentially just be that maybe if it's in a train station suburb, it might be a little bit further out. So that's where the compromise is, typically within the suburb, because not every property's worth the same, or it could be a compromise on the block size or the quality of the property. But yeah, that's the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that was Melbourne and schools. I just restricted the analysis of schools to Melbourne.
Sydney beaches.
Well known for its beaches, even internationally. So properties in beachside suburbs are much more expensive than the rest of Sydney. But a chart that compares the growth of beachside suburbs versus non-beach suburbs, it shows very little outperformance. So for that 44-year period since the end of 1980, the percentage difference, it has widened, but the superior growth should be measured in the hundreds of percent, given such a long time frame. Instead, the gap has only widened from about 25% back in 1980 to 50% now. And in that period of time, Sydney prices in general, they grew 2,400%. And we are comparing a widening of that gap of only 25% to 50%. And you can see there are eras where it outperforms pretty quickly and then it contracts again and then outperforms and then contracts again. So there's nothing in it. There's really no benefit in buying close to the beach in Sydney.
Even with that gap difference?
Yeah, it's over 44 years. That little difference is virtually inconsequential compared to 2,400% growth total.
Wouldn't that be a big difference? Like, what's the starting point there? Do you know what that number is?
Yeah, I didn't actually write it down, but it might be something like 70,000 versus.
So 70,000. So if I bought back in or if my parents bought back in 1980,
Your parents, yeah.
That property would now be worth, let's say it wasn't near a beach. We'll just pick a suburb. Pick a suburb, Jez.
That's not near a beach.
Yes.
Penrith.
So Penrith, that property worth about $1 million now. But if they bought in...
this is what the price gap is measuring. What you're trying to calculate now, just using your eye, that's what the price gap is measuring. So the gap at the start of the end of 1980, it's December 1980.
How much better off would I have been? I would have been better off by if I bought near that beachside, by 1.2 million?
25%, according to the...
That's a lot of money.
Well, you have to wait like 45 years.
All right, waiting.
It's like less than 1% per annum, a lot less than 1% per annum.
I'd take that in a Sydney suburb.
Okay, all right. Well,
but I can't afford it now. But back then,
back then you wouldn't have been able to afford it. This is the whole point. Why would you go to the trouble of putting more dollars at risk when you're not going to get any significant outperformance? And it's possible that right now we're at one of these other peaks and that over the next few years it's going to drop back down to where it started.
It's already had that big, like this is most probably the slide that it clearly shows it's had a massive run, hasn't it? Like these sort of, even though it doesn't look that, like for you're saying percentage gap isn't that significant, but good luck trying to afford something over $2 million.
Yeah, well, have a look at, say, 2013, 2014.
Yes, okay, that's
right.
Yeah,
so how do you know we're not about to have another one of those?
Correct.
So the whole point with whenever I've plotted a chart with two curves on it, a growth chart, what you see again and again is the curves diverge and then converge, diverge and converge.
In these, I guess Sydney's very popular for it, and there's a lot of commentary around it, but it's like rent in Sydney because the typical values are so much higher and invest in other locations. The challenge is if you rent and then you spend all your money on lifestyle, that's where people get unstuck.
Yeah,
it's like make sure your money is constantly invested.
Yeah.
All right. That's good. Really good graph.
Okay, so the next one was
suburbs near
shopping centres.
Shopping centres.
Yeah, so shops are an oft-quoted amenity to be near. So looking at them I did this countrywide now. Yeah, go on.
You know, I was about to say something, weren't you? It's funny. When we did a while ago, I called up the Townsville Council and I talked to the lady and she goes, "Oh, all these guys are calling up these buyers agents and this and that." And a lot of them can't speak very good English, but they're asking about infrastructure. Are these shops going in? I'm like, why would they ask that for?
Yeah. So a lot of people have been misled on this topic.
What's a selling point, isn't it? I hear it all the time. Oh, it's near a shopping centre or it's near a train station. It's just over and over. So it's great to see a presentation where...
Yeah, so a favourable amenity may command a higher price tag, but does it have higher capital growth? And no. So you have a look at this one. You can see that the price gap has ranged from about 25% on the far left to, it actually got up to as high as 55% back in, when's that, 2020?
And it's come back.
Yeah, and now it's come back. So as with most long-term charts, there are eras of above average growth where one market diverges from the other, but then that's usually followed by eras where the poor cousin catches up.
This is Australia-wide. Sorry, Jez,
yes,
to interrupt.
Australia-wide.
So that's Australia-wide, and what's classified as a big shopping centre, like a Westfield?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Westfield.
Yes, so a big shopping centre like that. Yeah, and again, this just confirms the comparison of apples and oranges. It's that story playing out again. You get the peaks and the troughs. You get the widening of the gap, and then you get the narrowing of the gap. So over such a long period of time, if the proximity of shops was an influencer on price growth, then we should have seen the gap stretch exponentially by hundreds of percent. But it's not even a couple of dozen.
Okay.
All right, so that's shopping centres. There's one more to go.
This is a good one. Airports.
Yeah, so airports. This analysis is only for Sydney and Melbourne. So the price gap, you can see there, has changed quite a lot over the history, but there's no obvious trend. So the price difference in 1980 was around about 35%. It got down to under 10% at one point and over 40% just before the turn of the century. And currently it's back to where it started at about 33%. So again, very little we can read into this. Like the others, over the long term, there's no significant benefit or disadvantage for this amenity.
Well, there's less data, or less, would you say less data points? Like you're looking at median airports where it's like what, maybe the Sydney.
That's right. Very, very
so you got what, Mascot, and then you've got in Melbourne, Tullamarine there. And then the other airport out, can't think of the top of my head. But yeah, the other one near Geelong. Yeah. Avalon.
You brought up an interesting point about the new Badgerys Creek Airport and what impact it's going to have. And we'd only know after the event what impact it had. There was a study performed by the Queensland University of Technology, and actually it's on the next slide.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, so it's the QUT and the Air Transport Innovation Centre. Now, this study was conducted around 2016, and it examined how the opening of Brisbane's International Airport back in 1988 affected property prices. Now, this is under the flight path, so they were concerned what would happen with Badgerys Creek or another airport or somewhere else when you introduce, say, a new runway or a new airport altogether. So being under the flight path is obviously quite noisy, so this is a negative amenity for some Brisbane suburbs. It was quite negative. But what their report found was that price growth suffered for only about 4 years. That's the 4 years immediately after the opening. But from then on, for the next 20 plus years, the growth of affected suburbs caught up with suburbs that were not affected by aircraft noise. So in other words, the amenities introduction only affected growth rates for a short time. Long term, no difference. No difference in growth rates compared with other suburbs that were not affected by aircraft noise.
Is this only for the Brisbane airport, did you say?
Just for that. So
it's only a small sample.
That's right, yeah. Well, it's a lot of suburbs in Brisbane, and there would be a fair few under the flight path. And they did some comprehensive analysis, but it is just one case. But you can see that the introduction of an amenity is going to affect growth rates, but only for a short period of time. Once prices have factored in the presence or absence of that amenity, whether it be good or bad, after that it's business as usual.
I guess it depends too where the airport is. Is that area already built out or not? Is there a lot of supply coming into that within that pocket? So it's interesting.
Yeah,
Walkscore.
so now all of these amenities that I have been examining so far have been in isolation. So schools in isolation of shopping centres and airports and train stations. What about a whole bunch of smaller amenities like a bus stop, a cafe, a gym, a place of worship, a skate parks? There's a metric called the Walkscore, which is published by Walkscore, and you can see it on walkscore.com.au. This score takes into consideration an enormous number of amenities, and it comes up with this overall score out of 100 for the walkability of a suburb. The score reflects how easy it is to get to common amenities like cafes, the schools, the shops on foot. That's why they call it the walk score. Now, if a suburb has a high walk score, then it must have a large number of diverse amenities that are well spread out across the suburb. So rather than measuring an isolated individual amenity, looking for some vague correlation to capital growth, what I've done is I've analysed the success of the walk score. And I've also noticed there are reports about walk score similar to school catchments. Oh, these properties have a high walk score and they're 20% more expensive than those properties that have a low walk score. So walk score does influence price, but once again, we're not interested in price, we're interested in growth. So does it have an impact on growth? And that's what I analysed in the next, well, we're coming up to a chart. So, oh yeah, that's right. I just need to point out something about this. Okay, so in the process of analysing walk score data, I have to point out there's not a lot of it because walk scores are a relatively new thing. So we only have walk scores dating back to December 2014. So it's only a decade. So you're barely going to see sort of the exponential growth in that sort of period of time. So I can't properly review its potential as a long-term growth predictor. But I made another assumption like I did with schools. So if you go to the next slide, have a quick scan of this list of suburbs just in Sydney and Melbourne for now. These were the top scoring suburbs by Walkscore back in December 2014. Now, you might be familiar with some of these suburbs. Perhaps you know where they are. What I'm going to do is compare this list of top suburbs to a decade later. So this is from 2014, but just have a guess where you think the top scoring Walkscore suburbs are now. If you go to the next slide.
I think I'm just going to have a crack here, but I think are they similar?
Spot on. So as you can see, they are all still pretty much the same suburbs, the same areas, the same type of suburbs. So here's the assumption that I've made in order to guess at the performance of a high walk score suburb versus a low walk score suburb. I'm going to assume the suburbs that rank highly by walk scores now were ranked highly by walk scores back in 1980. So I'm assuming suburbs like Haymarket, Ultimo, Chippendale, Carlton, Fitzroy, Melbourne, they've always been ranked highly by walk score, even before there was a walk score back in 1980.
I'm sure that buyers agents or property experts out there put this walk score in their reports. My question would be, why?
Yeah, well, it is difficult to do this sort of analysis. It's a lot easier to just have a theory and run with it.
Well, you wouldn't go, okay, a suburb's got a walk score of 20, so I'm not investing in there. Like, are there?
Well, do you want to see?
Okay, I do.
Okay, so based on that assumption that I clarified there, I split all the suburbs of the country up into 10 evenly sized buckets based on their Walkscore rankings.
Oh,
so
look at that.
10% of Australia's suburbs are in the first bucket, which is on the left there. That's the set of suburbs with a Walkscore ranging between 0 and 12. And you can see the Walkscore range is along the bottom left there, 0 to 12. So on the far right, the 10th bucket, that also contains 10% of Australia's suburbs, but these are the top 10% as ranked by Walkscore. So these suburbs have a Walkscore between 82 and 100. So these are jam-packed full of amenities. Then I calculated the median growth rate from 1980 to 2024 for each of these 10 buckets.
So a 44-year period.
That's right. And I plotted a line of best fit, which is that white dotted line at the top.
So per annum growth, that's
right.
roughly about between 7 to 8% consistently, but they're pretty much all the same, aren't they?
Yeah. So the gradient or slope of that white dotted line reflects the relationship between Walkscore and long-term growth. And because it's flat, it means there isn't one. So there is no benefit in suburbs. I mean, you look at the two polar opposites there, the Walkscore top decile 82 to 100 versus 0 to 12, there's virtually no difference in capital growth.
So why look at a Walkscore?
Yeah, it is not a predictor of capital growth.
I guess I'm trying to think what are the reasons, maybe because you can just jump on Google Maps a lot of the time, but I guess there's some good information on Walkscore to if you want to flush out a suburb quickly, but you can also go on Google Maps.
Well, one benefit to it is you can use it to help estimate what price you're going to pay for properties, because properties with good Walkscores will command a premium compared to properties where you've got to drive everywhere. So it serves some purpose. It can give you an idea of you got to pay extra. This is in walking distance to schools, shops, blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to give you any better capital growth over the long term.
I'm sure there's suburbs out there where there might be, for example, like a house or let's say a unit as an example that's maybe has a very low Walkscore that sees maybe outperforms these areas that have a very high Walkscore for the fact that maybe there's a limited amount of supply further out. Maybe it's already built out. Maybe there's no big high rises. I'm not sure, because you think around these train stations or we look at Chippendale as an example in Sydney, units everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what you were saying before about the introduction of a new amenity boosting the rate of growth, picture one of those top Walkscore ranked suburbs, say Haymarket in Sydney. Is it going to get a high-speed train station? Is it going to get another shopping centre, another cafe, another bar or boutique restaurant? But you compare that to a suburb right now that has a very low Walkscore, it has far more potential for all of those amenities to come along.
Very smart, Shepherd. Very smart.
All right, so the next slide, all I've been doing so far is looking at data at the suburb level. But there are some professionals in the industry who would claim that whatever growth the median for a suburb has had, the specific properties that they have picked out for their clients have outperformed that median. So they will refute this research, saying there are individual properties that outperform the median for the suburb as a whole. And they refer to these sort of properties as A-grade properties. And they may say that the A-grade properties have a better design or in a better street or on a better shaped blocks with better views, some of those features that you see listed there. Whatever the reasons are, they are wrong. There is no such thing as an A-grade property that outperforms over the long term, that is. So historical data disproves the concept of A-grade properties and C-grade properties too. And it's especially over the long term that it disproves this. Now, there's another episode that we've got on this very topic. We haven't published it yet, but keep your eye open for episode number 27.
EBS, Expert Busting Series,
episode number 27. Now, if you move forward to the next slide, this chart shows the variability in price that you're likely to see in a typical Australian suburb over the last 40 years. So it's measured as the deviation from the average as a percentage. That's a bit of a mouthful, I realise. Okay, so you'll have some properties that are more expensive than the average, some that are cheaper. How much do the expensive ones differ from the average? And that's what this curve is trying to show. So it's measured as a percentage. Typically, back in the 80s, you would see prices vary by plus or minus 40 to 50%. So that's towards the top left there. That's typically. Now, not always, just typically as measured using the standard deviation from the average. Now, if there were properties in a suburb that are A grade, then we should see an ever widening percentage gap between the A grades and the rest of the suburb. But as you can see, instead of the deviation increasing over time as A grade properties separate themselves from the rest, instead the deviation has narrowed. And that deviation should have increased exponentially up into the right top corner of that chart. Instead, it has actually slowly decreased.
So just back to that point. So that's a percentage standard deviation of the average property. Is that what you're saying?
So look at all the sales of properties in a particular suburb. How much higher are the more expensive ones? How much lower are the cheaper ones compared to the average? That's the standard deviation. Then measure that as a percentage of the average. Has it increased?
What is standard deviation?
It is a mathematical term, but just in layman's terms, it's just the variety of sale prices that you'll get in a suburb. So is it if you have a high standard deviation, there's tremendous variety of prices. If it's a low standard deviation, they're quite tight.
So explain to me at the start there, we've got 40% standard deviation as a percentage of the average. Can you give an example of that? So let's say property's worth
500,000.
We'll go $1 million.
All right, $1 million. Make the numbers easier. So 40% means that you will have typically properties in the same suburb. So you have the average in the suburb at $1 million. And then you might have some properties, quite a fair few, selling within, say, $1 million to 1.4, even some higher than that. But typically, the more expensive ones will be 1.4 mil. And then the cheaper ones might be, say, 600,000. So
that's a big standard deviation. That's a big difference in the median.
That's right. But nowadays it's much tighter. So if you have this concept of an A-grade property, it will just continue to outperform the average, and that gap will widen and widen and widen exponentially over a long period of time. But instead, what we see here in the data is that it's narrowed.
Okay, so if you look at all the sales of houses in the area, in that suburb, it's sort of getting a bit more tighter now. And that would make sense because there's been such large price increases over the years. You would think that percentage would sort of tighten up a little, or there'll be less variation. So we've gone from a variation of 40% down to what, maybe 25, 30?
Yeah, around 30 now. And I think that it might have something to do with just online data. We might be able to do desktop valuations. So you're not going to come up with the low ball offers aren't going to be as successful nowadays because everyone has access to decent data to make well-informed comparable market analysis. And so it's narrowed.
And I think back to the point, it depends on, like, A-grade property for me would be, depends on your budget, and it depends, like, if you're outsourcing to a buyer's agent, you need to find where their value add is. But I think from a purchasing property perspective, you don't want any headaches, do you? But you have to be careful you're not overpaying for someone else's renovation, because you're paying a premium for that, but then you're also paying the extra stamp duty on that actual property also. So it's like, depends on how hands-on you want to be. You want to try and find that nice middle ground with a property, don't you? Something that's not going to cause you too many headaches, but you can get a tenant straight in there.
Yeah. So I guess, not a dog box, but not recently renovated. So more on this topic, the next chart. So this is a different way of looking at the same concept of these so-called A-grade properties. So in this chart, I compare the highest sale price in the suburb to the median sale price to see how much higher it is. And that's indicated by the purple line. So you can see that in the 80s, the typical Australian suburb's highest sale price was about 80% higher than the median sale price. So the median is the middle one.
Okay, so let's have a look. So we've got the max above median. That purple,
the purple
lilac.
line, that's lilac, is it?
Purple, lilac, don't know. And then we've got the turquoise down the bottom.
Okay, so yeah, the turquoise line is the lowest sale price as a percentage of the median. So again, in the 80s, the cheapest sale price was typically 50% lower than the median sale price. So that.
So you're grabbing all the suburbs in Australia here, all the house suburbs?
I did limit it to, I think it was suburbs within significant urban areas. I have to check, but it is a very large sample size.
And what's a significant urban area for our listeners that don't know?
The Australian Bureau of Statistics define a significant urban area. It's usually like a city. Like Sydney is the largest. Sydney and Melbourne, they're the two largest significant urban areas. They have to have a population of at least 10,000 people.
Okay.
So you have some regional areas. Some of them are like Gold Coast Tweed Heads. So it actually crosses, Wollongong's one of them. Newcastle, Maitland, Cessnock, that's another one.
Great.
Central Coast, Geelong.
So what this is, so maybe let's start again like with an example of a property. So if, let's say we look at early on, we've got $1 million property. That's the difference in.
Okay, so the two lines are measuring two different things. So one line is measuring the difference between the median and the top sale, the most expensive property that sold.
Okay.
And the other one is measuring the difference between the median and the cheapest property. So how much cheaper than the median is the cheap one? It's around about 40%, about 45, nearly 50% back in the 80s. How much more expensive is the most expensive property compared to the median? Well, back in the 80s, it was around about, was that 75%? If you look at the line of best fit there, that's the dotted line.
So, okay, so that top line there is saying above. So if a property was, let's say the typical value was $1 million, and if it got up to, let's say, 80%, then that higher above average would be 1.8.
Yeah. So
but the lower though, if it was 40% below, it would be what, 600,000.
That's right.
So that's like a big gap. Like we're looking at the difference between 80% and 40%. So it stretches out.
Yeah. So the fact that the purple curve is above the turquoise curve means that more expensive properties are higher above the median than they are lower below the median.
And it's very interesting to see, and this is where a lot of, again, property professionals out there would say, I can buy your property under market value. Or so it's very interesting. But if you have a look, that gap is definitely shrinking, isn't it, over time?
Yeah, that's right. That's the story of this chart. So if the A-est of A-grade properties in a suburb continued to outperform the others, and if the C-est of the C-grade properties continue to underperform, then we should see both those lines getting higher and higher. Not only do they get lower, but they get closer. And that means that the variation from the most expensive property to the least expensive property has actually narrowed over the last 4 decades. So if there was such a thing as an A-grade property, that purple line should have exploded up towards the top of the chart and gone way over the edge before we even got to, say, the turn of the century, which is near the middle of the chart. But instead, there's been a gradual decline, so disproving the concept of A-grade properties.
Nice one.
So, yeah, if there is a benefit of buying closer to certain amenities, which makes your property, an A-grade or your suburb an A-grade, well, it's not seen in the data. All right, so data shows there's no reason to buy near amenities or far from them if they're an eyesore. It doesn't give you a growth booster. They're not a bad thing, but they just don't help. So, I hope that helps investors make more informed investment decisions. You don't need to avoid main roads. You don't need to avoid skate parks. You don't need to buy near schools and shops. It just doesn't really help. That's over the long term.
Just stay within your budgets. And, I think good episode, Jeremy. So...
Yeah, if this was informative to you and you know someone who's banging on about A-grade properties, you might like to use the share link and send them this. It'd be good to hear also from those objectors what data sets have you looked at, what fact checking have you done. So yeah, there's a like button there to let us know if this is the sort of thing you're interested in, and leave your comments too.
I think that's an important point. If viewers see a difference in data, they've done their own analysis, send it through. We'll have a look. Maybe we've missed something.
Yeah.
So it's just good to
happy to research other data. Not so happy to just hear another opinion.
Alrighty, so thanks for tuning into Expert Busting Series 4. Next time we'll explore why proximity to CBD is so overrated. See you then. Take care.